Elena Vasquez learned how to be invisible before she learned how to read. Growing up in the servants' quarters of the Hartwell estate, she understood one rule above all others. Stay quiet. Stay small. Stay out of the way. Her mother, Rosa, had drilled this into her since she was old enough to walk. In a house like this, people like them were meant to be shadows. Nothing more. Rosa had worked as a housekeeper for the Hartwell family for 22 years. She started when she was barely 19, a young woman from a poor village who had come to the city with nothing but hope and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. The Hartwells paid well enough, and they were not cruel. But they were rich, and rich people, Rosa had learned, did not see the hands that cleaned their floors or washed their sheets. They saw clean floors. They saw fresh sheets. The hands were invisible. Elena spent her childhood in that invisible world. Every afternoon, after school let out, she would take the bus to the estate and slip through the back entrance. She knew which doors creaked and which hallways were safe to walk through. She knew the rhythm of the house like she knew her own heartbeat. When the family had guests, she stayed in the kitchen. When there were parties, she stayed in her mother's small room in the basement. She did her homework on a wobbly wooden table, while her mother folded towels or polished silverware nearby. The Hartwell estate was famous in the city. Not just because the family was wealthy, but because they were patrons of the arts. They donated to symphonies, sponsored young musicians, and hosted grand concerts in their ballroom. The ballroom was legendary. It had crystal chandeliers that caught the light like frozen waterfalls. The floors were marble, polished so perfectly that you could see your reflection in them, and at the center of it all sat a grand piano. A Steinway. It was worth more money than Rosa would earn in her entire lifetime. Elena was never allowed in the ballroom. Not to clean. Not to look. Not for any reason. Her mother had made this very clear. That room was for the family and their important guests. That piano was not something for little girls with dirty shoes and second-hand dresses to touch. But Elena could not stop thinking about it. She had seen it once, by accident. She was 8 years old, and she had wandered too far down the wrong hallway while looking for her mother. She pushed open a heavy wooden door, and suddenly found herself standing at the edge of the most beautiful room she had ever seen. The afternoon sun was streaming through the tall windows, and the piano sat there in the golden light like something from a dream. Elena had stood frozen. Her breath caught in her chest. She did not understand why, but looking at that piano made her want to cry. Her mother found her 30 seconds later and pulled her away so fast that Elena's arm hurt for an hour afterward. Rosa's face was tight with fear. "Never go in there," she whispered. "Never. Do you understand me? We could lose everything." Number. Elena understood. Or at least, she tried to. But that image of the piano stayed with her. It lived in her mind like a photograph she could not throw away. From that day on, she started hearing music in her head. It was strange at first. She would be sitting in class or eating dinner, and suddenly there would be melodies playing somewhere deep inside her. Not songs she had heard on the radio. Not music from television. Something else. Something that felt like it came from her own soul. She did not tell anyone about this. Not her mother. Not her teachers. Not the few friends she had at school. She knew it would sound crazy. How could a poor girl who had never touched an instrument hear symphonies in her head? It made no sense. So she kept it to herself, like so many other things. The years passed slowly in that big house. Elena grew from a quiet child into a quiet teenager. She was a good student, careful and hardworking, just like her mother had taught her to be. She never caused trouble. She never asked for things she could not have. She learned to shrink herself down so small that sometimes she felt like she might disappear completely. But late at night, when the estate fell silent and the family was asleep, something inside her would wake up. Her mother often had to clean the ballroom after evening events, and Elena would go with her to help. She was not supposed to. But Rosa could not afford childcare, and leaving a young girl alone was not safe. So Elena would come along, carrying dust cloths and polish bottles, and she would work in silence alongside her mother, and every single time, she would find herself staring at the piano. She never touched it. She was too afraid. Her mother would glance at her with warning eyes, and Elena would look away. But when Rosa was busy on the other side of the room, Elena would drift closer. She would stand just a few feet away from the instrument and study its curves, its keys, the way the black and white stretched out like a road leading somewhere she could not follow. Sometimes the moonlight would spill through the windows and fall across those keys. In those moments, Elena would hold her breath. The music in her head would grow louder, more insistent, as if it was trying to escape through her fingertips. Her hands would tremble at her sides. It took every ounce of strength she had not to reach out and touch. One night, when Elena was 12, her mother caught her standing inches from the piano. Rosa had been on her hands and knees, scrubbing a stain near the window. When she looked up and saw her daughter so close to that forbidden instrument, her face went pale. "Elena," she said sharply, "step back, now." Elena did not move. She could not. Her eyes were fixed on the keys. Rosa rushed over and grabbed her daughter's shoulders. "What are you doing? Do you want to get us fired? Do you want us to end up on the street?" "I just wanted to look at it, Mama," Elena whispered. "Looking leads to wanting. Wanting leads to reaching. And reaching." Rosa's voice broke. She pulled Elena close and held her tight. "We are here to serve, mija. That is our life. Not this. Not dreams about pianos and music. That world is not for people like us." Elena felt tears burning in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She nodded against her mother's shoulder. "I understand," she said quietly, but she did not understand. Not really. Because how could she explain to her mother that the music would not leave her alone? How could she describe the way it felt to hear entire orchestras playing inside her mind while she scrubbed floors and washed windows? How could she make anyone understand that every time she looked at that piano, she felt like she was looking at a part of herself that she had never been allowed to meet? That night, Elena made a silent promise to herself. She would find a way. Somehow, someday, she would touch those keys. She would let the music out. She did not know how. She did not know when, but she knew, deep in her heart, that she could not spend her whole life being invisible. Some dreams are too strong to stay locked away forever. And Elena's dream was already growing roots, pushing up through the concrete of her small, quiet life, reaching toward a light she could not yet see. 2 years passed, and Elena buried her dream deep inside her chest. She went to school. She helped her mother clean. She did everything she was supposed to do. But the music never stopped. It played in her head when she woke up in the morning. It followed her through the hallways of the estate. It whispered to her when she tried to fall asleep at night. No matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the music was always there, waiting. The summer Elena turned 14, something changed. The Hartwells decided to renovate the old greenhouse at the far end of their property. It had been abandoned for years, filled with broken pots and dead plants and forgotten things that nobody wanted anymore. Workers came to clear it out, hauling away trash and debris for weeks. Elena watched them from a distance, curious but careful to stay invisible as always. One evening, she overheard 2 workers talking near the kitchen entrance. They were laughing about something they had found inside the greenhouse. "An old piano," they said. "Broken and useless, missing keys and covered in dust." They were going to throw it away with the rest of the junk. Elena's heart stopped. She did not sleep that night. She lay in her small bed in the basement, staring at the ceiling, thinking about that piano. A broken piano. A forgotten piano. Something nobody wanted. Something that was about to be destroyed. Before dawn, while her mother was still asleep, Elena slipped out of the servants' quarters. The sky was gray and the air was cold, but she barely noticed. She walked across the grounds with her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The greenhouse stood at the edge of the property like a ghost, its glass walls cracked and cloudy with age. She pushed open the rusty door and stepped inside. And there it was. The piano sat in the corner, covered in a thick layer of dust. It was old and damaged. 3 of the keys were missing completely. The wood was warped and stained, but to Elena, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She walked toward it slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal that might run away. Her hands were shaking. She reached out and touched the surface, feeling the dust coat her fingertips. Then she sat down on the broken bench and placed her hands on the keys. She pressed one down. The note that came out was weak and off tune, but it was real. It was music. After 14 years of silence, Elena finally heard a sound that matched the melodies in her head. She started to cry. From that morning on, Elena had a secret. Every day before dawn, she would sneak out to the greenhouse and practice. She had no teacher. She had no lessons. She did not even know how to read sheet music. All she had was a water-damaged music theory book that she found in a box of trash near the greenhouse door. Someone had thrown it away years ago, but to Elena, it was a treasure. She taught herself everything. She learned the names of the notes. She learned how the keys connected to sounds. She learned how to position her fingers, how to move her hands, how to make the broken piano sing despite its missing pieces. It was slow and painful. Her fingers bled. Her back ached from sitting on the broken bench. Some mornings she wanted to give up because it felt impossible, but she never did. There was something inside Elena that refused to quit. Maybe it was all those years of staying silent. Maybe it was all those nights of watching the Steinway from across the ballroom, wanting something she was told she could never have. Maybe it was the music itself, demanding to be let out after being trapped inside her for so long. Whatever it was, it pushed her forward every single day. Months passed. Elena got better. Then she got good. Then she got extraordinary. By the time she was 16, she could play pieces that most students spent years learning in expensive conservatories. Chopin, Debussy, Rachmaninoff. She learned them all from recordings she found at the public library, listening on old headphones, and then going to the greenhouse to figure out the notes by ear. It should have been impossible. A girl with no training, no money, no connections, teaching herself concert-level piano on a broken instrument in an abandoned greenhouse. But Elena did not know it was supposed to be impossible. So she just did it anyway. The greenhouse became her sanctuary. It was the one place where she did not have to be invisible. When she sat at that piano, she was not the maid's daughter. She was not poor. She was not small, or quiet, or forgettable. She was herself, fully and completely. For the first time in her life, she kept her secret carefully guarded. Her mother never knew. The Hartwells never knew. Elena made sure to return before anyone woke up. Slipping back into her bed with sore fingers and a full heart, the double life was exhausting, but she did not care. The music was worth everything, but secrets have a way of escaping, no matter how carefully you try to keep them. It happened on a warm evening in late spring. Elena had stayed at the greenhouse longer than usual, lost in a piece by Chopin that she had been working on for weeks. The Ballade, No. 1. It was one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire, full of emotion and technical challenges that would make even professional pianists nervous. But Elena loved it. She loved the way it started soft and sad, then built into something powerful and overwhelming. It felt like her own story, translated into music. She was so deep in the piece that she did not hear the footsteps outside. She did not notice the shadow that passed by the cracked glass wall. She did not see the young man who stopped at the broken window and stood frozen, watching her. His name was Jonathan Hartwell. He was the nephew of the family patriarch, a quiet young man in his early 20s who had always felt like an outsider in his own wealthy world. He had been walking the grounds that evening, trying to clear his head after an argument with his uncle about his future. He was supposed to take over part of the family business, but his heart was not in it. He felt trapped by expectations he had never asked for. And then he heard the music. At first, he thought he was imagining it. The sound was faint, carried on the evening breeze, but it was unmistakably a piano. He followed it without thinking, drawn by a melody so beautiful and so heartbreaking that it made his chest ache. When he reached the greenhouse and looked through the dirty window, he could not believe what he saw. The maid's daughter. The quiet girl who always kept her eyes down when she passed him in the hallways. The invisible one. She was sitting at a wrecked piano in an abandoned building, playing Chopin like her life depended on it. Her eyes were closed. Her face was intense with concentration. Her fingers moved across the broken keys with a skill that Jonathan had only seen in concert halls. He stood there for almost 20 minutes, unable to move. He watched her finish the ballade and move into another piece, something softer and more melancholy. He watched her make mistakes and correct them instantly, her determination visible in every movement. He watched her pour her entire soul into that broken instrument, and he understood something that changed him forever. This girl was not ordinary. She was a miracle hiding in plain sight. Jonathan did not announce himself. He did not knock on the door or call out her name. He knew, somehow, that this was something sacred, something private, something that was not his to interrupt. Instead, he walked away quietly, his mind spinning with questions. How long had she been doing this? Did anyone else know? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do with what he had just witnessed? He did not have answers that night. But a seed had been planted in his mind. A plan was already beginning to form, even if he did not fully understand it yet. Elena finished her practice as the stars came out. She closed the lid of the piano gently, like she was saying goodnight to an old friend. Then she slipped out of the greenhouse and walked back to the servants' quarters, completely unaware that everything was about to change. She did not know that someone had finally seen her. She did not know that her invisible days were numbered. The world was about to find out what Elena Vasquez could do. Jonathan Hartwell could not forget what he had seen. For weeks after that evening at the greenhouse, the image of Elena playing piano haunted him. He would be sitting in business meetings or having dinner with his family, and suddenly his mind would drift back to that broken-down building. The dust floating in the fading light, the cracked keys, and that girl, eyes closed, fingers flying, creating something so beautiful that it did not seem possible. He started doing research. He looked up the pieces she had been playing and discovered they were among the most difficult in classical music. He watched videos of professional pianists performing the same works and realized that Elena was not just good, she was exceptional, maybe even once in a generation. And nobody knew. Nobody except him. Jonathan came from a world where talent was nurtured from birth. Rich kids got the best teachers, the finest instruments, the connections that opened every door. He had watched countless young musicians come through his family's estate over the years, pampered prodigies who had been handed every advantage. Most of them were technically skilled but emotionally hollow. They played the notes correctly but without soul. Elena was different. She had taught herself on a broken piano in an abandoned greenhouse. She had no advantages, no support, no one believing in her. And yet she played with more passion and feeling than anyone Jonathan had ever heard. It was not fair. It was not right. Someone needed to do something. So Jonathan made a decision. Every year, the Hartwell family hosted a special event at their estate, a masterclass led by a world-famous musician, where talented young pianists could perform and receive guidance from a master. It was invitation only, reserved for students from the best conservatories and music schools, the kind of event that could launch a career. This year, the guest of honor was Maestro Victor Aldridge. Aldridge was a legend in the classical music world. He had conducted the greatest orchestras on every continent. He had performed for presidents and kings. His recordings had sold millions of copies. But he was also known for something else: his cruelty. Maestro Aldridge believed that musical talent was inherited. He thought that only people from certain backgrounds, certain families, certain bloodlines, could truly understand and create great art. He had no patience for what he called pretenders. People who came from poor or common backgrounds and dared to think they belonged in his world. He had destroyed careers with a single cutting remark. He had made students cry in front of audiences. He enjoyed it. Jonathan knew all of this. He knew that submitting Elena's name to the masterclass was a risk. But he also knew that if she could play in front of Aldridge and impress him, it would change everything. Doors would open. Opportunities would appear. Her life would never be the same. So he did it. Without telling anyone, Jonathan recorded Elena playing one evening, standing outside the greenhouse window with his phone. The audio quality was poor, but the talent was undeniable. He submitted the recording along with an application, listing her name but leaving out the detail that she was the housekeeper's daughter. 2 weeks later, Elena received an envelope. She found it tucked under the door of the servants' quarters, addressed to her name in elegant handwriting. Inside was a single card inviting her to participate in the Hartwell Estate masterclass with Maestro Victor Aldridge. She read it 3 times, certain there had been some mistake. Her mother found her sitting on the bed, holding the card with trembling hands. "What is that?" Rosa asked, her voice sharp with worry. Elena showed her. Rosa's face went pale. "This is a joke," her mother said. "Someone is playing a cruel trick on you. Throw it away." "But Mama..." "What if it's real? What if someone heard me play and heard you play?" Rosa's eyes widened. "Elena, what have you been doing? What have you not told me?" The truth came out. All of it. The greenhouse. The broken piano. The years of secret practice. Elena watched her mother's face shift through a dozen emotions. Shock. Fear. Anger. And beneath it all, something that looked almost like pride, quickly buried. "You should not have done this," Rosa said finally. "You should not have kept secrets. But what is done is done." She looked at the invitation again, her jaw tight. "If you go to this thing, they will humiliate you. These people do not want us in their world." "Maybe," Elena said quietly, "but I have to try." The day of the masterclass arrived like a storm on the horizon. Elena had nothing fancy to wear. Her mother gave her a simple blue dress, the nicest thing they owned. It was old and slightly faded, but it was clean, and it fit. Rosa helped her daughter get ready in silence, her hands gentle, but her eyes filled with worry. "Keep your head down," Rosa said as Elena prepared to leave. "Do not draw attention to yourself. And if they are cruel, just walk away. Promise me." Elena promised. But deep inside, she knew she would not be able to keep that promise. Not today. The ballroom was filled with people when Elena arrived. Young musicians in expensive clothes chatted with their wealthy parents. Teachers from famous conservatories stood in small groups, discussing technique and theory. And at the center of it all, surrounded by admirers, stood Maestro Victor Aldridge. He was tall and thin, with silver hair swept back from a sharp face. His eyes were cold and calculating, scanning the room like a predator looking for weakness. When he laughed, it was not a warm sound. It was the laugh of someone who enjoyed watching others fail. Elena stood near the entrance, feeling completely out of place. Her dress was wrong. Her shoes were wrong. Everything about her screamed that she did not belong here. She could feel the other students looking at her, whispering behind their hands. She heard fragments of their conversations. Who is she? What school is she from? Why does she look like that? She wanted to run. Every instinct told her to turn around and leave before something terrible happened. But then she saw the piano. The Steinway. The same one she had stared at through doorways for her entire childhood. It sat there in the center of the room, gleaming under the chandeliers. Waiting, she stayed. The masterclass began. One by one, students were called to perform. They were good, technically precise, well-trained. Maestro Aldridge listened with a bored expression, occasionally offering comments that were more insult than instruction. The audience laughed at his jokes, even when they were mean. That was the way of this world. The powerful were allowed to be cruel. Then the host announced the next name. Elena Vasquez. She stood up, her legs shaking. She began walking toward the piano. And that was when Maestro Aldridge raised his hand. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Vasquez. I do not recognize this name from any conservatory." "Who is this girl?" Someone near the back of the room answered. Elena did not see who, but the words hit her like a punch to the stomach. "She is the housekeeper's daughter, Maestro." The room went silent. Then Aldridge began to laugh. It was a cruel, mocking sound that echoed off the marble walls. Others joined in, nervous laughter spreading through the crowd like a disease. Elena stood frozen in the middle of the room, her face burning, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. "The housekeeper's daughter?" Aldridge repeated, shaking his head. "This is a masterclass, not a charity event. What is next? Shall we invite the gardener to conduct the symphony?" More laughter. Louder now. Elena saw her mother standing in the corner of the room, holding a tray of glasses. Her head bowed in shame. Rosa's shoulders were shaking. She was crying. Aldridge waved his hand dismissively. "Please, girl, leave now, before you embarrass yourself further. This is not the place for people like you." Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. The exit was right behind her. All she had to do was turn around and walk away. That was what everyone expected. That was what she was supposed to do, but her feet would not move. Because beyond Aldridge, beyond the laughing crowd, beyond all the cruelty and judgment, the piano was still there, waiting for her, calling to her, and something inside Elena, something that had been building for 16 years, finally refused to stay silent. Elena stood in the middle of that ballroom, surrounded by laughter and judgment, and felt something break inside her. But it was not her spirit. It was not her hope. What broke was the invisible chain that had been wrapped around her heart for 16 years, the chain that told her to stay quiet, stay small, stay invisible. She was done being invisible. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Walk away. Do not draw attention to yourself. Promise me." But there was another voice too. A deeper voice that came from somewhere she could not name. It said only one word: play. Elena did not look at Aldridge. She did not look at the laughing crowd or the smirking students in their expensive clothes. She looked only at the piano. The Steinway, the instrument she had dreamed about since she was 8 years old. The thing she had been forbidden to touch her entire life. She started walking toward it. The laughter began to fade. People exchanged confused glances. What was she doing? Did she not understand that she had been dismissed? Security guards near the door started moving, ready to escort her out. But Elena kept walking, one step, then another. Her worn shoes clicked against the marble floor. Her simple blue dress swayed with each movement. She could feel every eye in the room on her. But she did not care anymore. For the first time in her life, she truly did not care what anyone thought. She reached the piano and sat down on the bench. The room went completely silent. Even the guards stopped, unsure what to do. Maestro Aldridge's smirk flickered. He raised his hand, about to order her removal, and then Elena placed her fingers on the keys. The first note rang out like thunder. It filled the ballroom, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers and the marble walls and the painted ceiling. It was a single note, pure and clear and impossibly beautiful. The sound hung in the air like something alive, and for a moment, nobody breathed. Then Elena began to play. She chose Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto. Number 2. The famous opening sequence that she had practiced 1,000 times in that broken-down greenhouse. It was one of the most demanding pieces ever written. A work that required not just technical skill, but emotional depth that most musicians spent decades trying to achieve. Elena played it like she had written it herself. Her fingers moved across the keys with a speed and precision that seemed almost supernatural. The melody poured out of her, rich and dark and full of longing. It was the sound of every dream she had been forced to bury, every night she had spent staring at the piano from across the room, every tear she had hidden from her mother, every moment she had felt worthless and small and invisible. All of it came out through her hands. The audience sat frozen. The students who had been whispering about her dress were now staring with their mouths open. Their teachers had gone pale. Nobody had expected this. Nobody could have imagined that the maid's daughter, the girl in the faded blue dress, could play like this. In the corner of the room, Rosa stood completely still. The tray of glasses in her hands was shaking so badly that the crystal clinked together. Tears streamed down her face. But she did not wipe them away. She could not move. She could only watch her daughter transform before her eyes. Jonathan Hartwell gripped the back of a chair so hard his knuckles turned white. He had known Elena was talented. He had heard her play through the window of the greenhouse. But this was something else entirely. This was not just talent. This was destiny unfolding in real time. And Maestro Victor Aldridge stood at the center of it all, his face changing moment by moment. The smirk was gone. The cruelty in his eyes was replaced by something else. Confusion at first. Then disbelief. Then something that looked almost like fear. Because Aldridge had spent 50 years in the world of classical music, he had heard thousands of pianists. He had trained prodigies and performed with legends. He knew, better than almost anyone alive, what true genius sounded like. And he was hearing it now. From a 16-year-old girl who had never had a lesson in her life, Elena moved through the piece like she was possessed. The music grew more intense, building in waves of sound that filled every corner of the ballroom. Her eyes were closed. Her face was concentrated but peaceful, like she had finally come home after a lifetime of wandering. She was not performing for the audience. She was not trying to prove anything to Aldridge. She was simply letting out something that had been trapped inside her for too long. The middle section of the concerto was softer, more tender. Elena's touch became gentle, almost delicate. The notes floated through the air like whispered secrets. An older woman in the front row began to cry. A young man who had laughed at Elena earlier wiped his eyes quickly, hoping no one would notice. Then the finale approached. The music built again, stronger and more powerful than before. Elena's hands flew across the keys in patterns so complex they seemed impossible. The sound grew and grew until it filled not just the room but seemed to fill the entire world. And then, with one final cascade of notes, it was over. The last chord hung in the air. Elena lifted her hands from the keys and let them rest in her lap. She opened her eyes. The silence lasted for what felt like an eternity. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire ballroom seemed to be holding its breath, trying to process what had just happened. The Maid's daughter had just played Rachmaninoff with more passion and skill than most concert pianists could achieve in a lifetime. It did not make sense. It was not supposed to be possible. Then, from the middle of the room, someone started clapping. It was a slow clap at first. Hesitant. Uncertain. But it was joined by another, then another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom had erupted into applause. People rose to their feet. The standing ovation spread like wildfire. Wealthy patrons and conservatory students alike united in their awe. But Elena was not looking at them. She was looking at her mother. Rosa had dropped the tray. Glasses lay shattered at her feet, but she did not notice. She stood there with her hand pressed over her heart, sobbing openly now. And for the first time in Elena's life, she saw something new in her mother's eyes. Pride. Pure, unashamed pride. Elena felt her own tears finally fall. All those years of hiding. All those mornings in the greenhouse. Playing on broken keys until her fingers bled. All the times she had been told that people like her could not dream. It had all led to this moment. The applause continued, but Elena barely heard it. She was lost in her mother's gaze, in the silent conversation passing between them. "I see you now," Rosa's eyes seemed to say. "I see who you really are, and I am so sorry I ever told you to be small." Then a movement near the piano caught Elena's attention. She turned her head and saw Maestro Victor Aldridge walking toward her. The applause faded as people noticed. What would he say? Would he dismiss her again? Would he find some way to diminish what she had just done? Aldridge stopped in front of the piano. His face was unreadable. The room waited. And then, slowly, the most famous conductor in the world did something he had never done before in his entire career. He bowed. It was a deep bow, formal and respectful. The kind of bow a student gives to a master. The kind of bow that acknowledges not just talent, but something greater, something rare, something that comes along once in a generation. When he straightened up, there were tears in his eyes. "I have been a fool," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I have spent my life believing that greatness was something you were born into, that it was inherited like money or titles." He paused, looking at Elena with new eyes. "You have proven me wrong. Not just wrong. Foolish. And I am grateful for it." 41 ready 1. Foolish President. 41 ready 1. 41 ready 1. Elena looked at this man who had mocked her just minutes ago. She thought about all the cruel things he had said, about all the students he had humiliated over the years, about his belief that people like her did not deserve to dream. She could have been gracious. She could have thanked him and accepted his apology quietly, but Elena had spent 16 years being quiet. And she was done. "I do not need your apology, Maestro," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent room. "And I never needed your permission." The room gasped. No one spoke to Victor Aldridge that way. No one. But then something unexpected happened. Aldridge smiled. Not a cruel smile. A real one. "No," he said softly. "No, you did not." And that was the moment Elena Vasquez stopped being invisible forever. The night after the master class, Elena could not sleep. She lay in her small bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment in her mind. The laughter, the walk to the piano, the first note, her mother's tears, Aldridge's bow. It all felt like a dream. Part of her kept waiting to wake up and discover that none of it had really happened. But it had happened, and everything was different now. Word spread fast. In the world of classical music, news travels like wildfire, and what happened at the Hartwell estate was the kind of story people could not stop talking about. The maid's daughter who silenced a maestro. The untrained girl who played Rachmaninoff like she had been born with the music already inside her. Within days, Elena's name was everywhere. The first phone call came from Juilliard, then the Royal Academy of Music in London, then the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia. Scholarship offers poured in from schools that usually only accepted students who had been training since childhood. They wanted Elena. They wanted the girl who had taught herself piano in an abandoned greenhouse on a broken instrument. Elena did not know how to respond. She had spent her whole life expecting nothing, and now suddenly the world was offering her everything. It was overwhelming. Terrifying. She kept looking at her mother, searching for guidance, but Rosa seemed just as lost as she was. It was Jonathan who helped them navigate those first chaotic weeks. He sat with Elena and her mother at the kitchen table, explaining what each offer meant, what each school could provide. He asked no credit for what he had done. He never mentioned that he was the one who had submitted her recording. He simply helped because it was the right thing to do. One evening, while Rosa was washing dishes, Elena asked him why. Why had he risked everything to give her this chance? Why did he care what happened to a girl he barely knew? Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something Elena would never forget. "Because talent like yours does not belong to you alone. It belongs to everyone who will ever hear you play. And it would have been a crime to let it stay hidden." Elena chose Juilliard. It was the hardest decision she had ever made, because it meant leaving her mother behind. Rosa could not come to New York. Her life was at the estate, her job, her small room in the basement. For the first time in 16 years, they would be apart. The day Elena left, Rosa held her daughter for a long time. Neither of them spoke. There were no words for what they were feeling. All those years of sacrifice. All those mornings Rosa had worked double shifts so Elena could stay in school. All those nights she had told her daughter not to dream too big, trying to protect her from a world that seemed designed to break people like them. "I was wrong," Rosa whispered finally. "I was so afraid for you that I almost taught you to be afraid too. But you were braver than me, mija. You always were." Elena cried the entire bus ride to the airport. But somewhere over Pennsylvania, she wiped her eyes and looked out the window at the clouds below. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The greenhouse, the broken piano, the music that had refused to stay silent inside her. She was not just carrying her own dreams anymore. She was carrying her mother's dreams too. All the things Rosa had given up. all the hopes she had buried, so her daughter could survive. Elena was going to honor every single sacrifice by becoming the best pianist she could possibly be. The next 3 years were the hardest of her life. Juilliard was nothing like teaching herself in a greenhouse. The other students had been training since they were toddlers. They could read sheet music the way most people read newspapers. They knew theory and history and technique that Elena had never even heard of. She struggled. There were moments when she felt like a fraud, like she did not belong there. Like everyone would eventually realize, she was just a maid's daughter, pretending to be something she was not. Imposter syndrome hit her hard, especially in the first year. But Elena had something the other students did not have. She had hunger. She had years of wanting something so badly that it felt like a fire burning in her chest. While other students complained about practice schedules, Elena practiced until her fingers cramped and her eyes blurred. While others took breaks, she pushed harder. She had fought too hard to get here. She was not going to waste a single moment. By her 3rd year, Elena was at the top of her class. Her professors called her a phenomenon. Critics who attended student recitals wrote about her with words like transcendent and once in a generation. But Elena did not care about the praise. She cared about the music. She cared about the feeling she got when she sat at a piano and let everything else fall away. She also cared about her mother. Every Sunday, no matter how busy she was, Elena called home. She told Rosa about her classes, her performances, her small apartment in New York, and Rosa told her about life at the estate, about the new flowers in the garden, about the small joys that filled her days. They never talked about the past. They did not need to. They had survived it together, and that was enough. The invitation to perform at Carnegie Hall came in Elena's final year at Juilliard. It was a debut concert, a chance to introduce herself to the world as a professional pianist. When Elena opened the letter, her hands shook so badly she could barely read the words. Carnegie Hall. The most famous concert venue in the world. The place where legends were made. She called her mother immediately. "Mama," she said, her voice breaking, "I need you to come to New York." Rosa tried to refuse. She said she did not have the right clothes. She said she would not fit in. She said all the same things she had said for years. The words of a woman who had been taught to believe she did not belong in beautiful places. But Elena would not hear it. "You are coming," she said firmly. "You are going to sit in the front row. And you are going to watch your daughter play at Carnegie Hall." That is not a request. The night of the concert, the hall was packed. Critics, musicians, patrons of the arts from around the world had come to see the young woman everyone was talking about. The maid's daughter. The girl who had taught herself piano. The miracle from the greenhouse. But Elena was not thinking about any of them. She was thinking about one person only. Rosa sat in the front row, wearing the same simple blue dress she had given Elena years ago for the master class. She had refused to buy anything new. She said this dress had brought her daughter luck, and she was not about to change it now. When Elena walked onto the stage, the applause was thunderous, but she barely heard it. Her eyes found her mother immediately. Rosa was sitting straight and tall, her hands folded in her lap, tears already streaming down her face. Elena sat at the piano. She took a breath, and then she played. She played for every night in the greenhouse, for every hour of practice on broken keys, for every doubt she had overcome, and every door that had been slammed in her face. But most of all, she played for her mother, for the woman who had cleaned floors and folded sheets so her daughter could have a chance at something more. When the final note faded, the hall erupted. Standing ovation, cheers, critics wiping their eyes. But Elena only saw one thing: her mother, standing in the front row, clapping with her whole heart, pride shining through her tears. After the concert, Elena gave an interview backstage. A reporter asked her what message she wanted to share with the world. Elena thought for a moment. Then she spoke. "My mother spent her whole life being invisible so that I could one day be seen. Every note I play is for her. Every success I have is hers, as much as it is mine. Never underestimate the power of a parent's sacrifice. And never let anyone tell you that your dreams are too big for someone like you." Today, Elena Vasquez is one of the most celebrated pianists in the world. She has performed on every continent and won every major award in classical music. But her greatest achievement is not any trophy or title. It is the foundation she created. A scholarship program for children from poor families who dream of making music. Every year, hundreds of kids who cannot afford lessons or instruments receive the chance Elena never had. She personally reviews every application. She remembers what it felt like to want something so badly and have no way to reach it. And in the old greenhouse on the Hartwell estate, which has been converted into a music school for underprivileged youth, there is a small bronze plaque beside the original broken piano. Visitors often stop to read it. Some of them cry. The plaque says simply, "Where dreams are forbidden, let music rebel." Elena wrote those words herself. Because she knows better than anyone that some dreams are too powerful to stay locked away. And sometimes, the girl everyone overlooked becomes the voice that changes everything.